Hello and welcome to this new video. In the previous video, we adapted the project to integrate Steam lobby sessions. In this video, we will continue working on Steam to integrate dedicated server sessions. On the implementation side, there's nothing to modify. However, in the current state of the project, creating and connecting to the dedicated server won't work because when we talk about dedicated servers on Steam, there are some considerations to take into account. Basically, there are two things. For your project to be compatible with launching a dedicated server on Steam, there's a configuration to be done in your Steamworks application and also in your Steam plugin configuration. So, in this video, we will see how to proceed. According to the Steam plugin documentation, to set up a server instance, the flag usePresence must be false when creating the dedicated session. This is already the case for our dedicated server session. As mentioned in the documentation, dedicated servers require the following three macros, and their values must match the configuration defined in your Steamworks application. These macros are not accessible via Blueprint, so to configure them, we must generate the C++ project files and then add them in the target.cs file of your project. First of all, go to your Steamworks application, then navigate to Application, Dedicated Servers. On this page, you need to provide the information for dedicated game servers. The product name can be the name of your game or your Unreal Engine project. The version must be a 4-part version. The server browser name is the name you want to be displayed in the Steam server browser. I'll give Easy OSS as the product name. I copy the version of the Steam game that I defined in the config.ini file. Finally, I provide the name for the server browser. Click on Save, and then publish your changes. We now need to generate the C++ project. We need Visual Studio to modify the target.cs file and to build the solution after this change. If you don't have Visual Studio, you need to install it first. To generate the C++ project, you just need to add an empty C++ class to your project. Wait for the project to be generated, then open it in Visual Studio. Close Unreal Engine, then go to the file project name .target.cs of your project. This file is generated by Unreal Engine and is located in the source folder of your project. In this file, we need to add the definitions of the 4 macros mentioned in the documentation, giving them the correct values according to the information we defined in the Steamworks application. The definition of a macro in this file is done via globaldefinitions.add. The parameter of the add function is the name of the macro, followed by an equal sign, followed by the value to be assigned. Give this macro the product name defined in the Steamworks application. Since this value is a string, it must be enclosed in quotation marks, so we need to use the escape character \. Duplicate the line to define the other macros. This macro should also take the product name defined in the Steamworks application. Add the third macro. Give this macro the name of the server browser. Add the fourth macro. The value to assign to this macro is the ID of your Steamworks application. There is one more thing to add. In fact, with this modification, the dedicated server integration will work fine, but it will cause an error during the packaging of the project because these macros are part of the build environment, and therefore, we are not allowed to modify them. So, we need to specify in this file that this override is allowed, and this is done by setting the variable override build environment to true. Save the file, then build the solution for the development editor. Make sure Unreal Engine is not open, otherwise the build will fail. Wait for the process to finish, you should have 0 errors. Close the C++ project, then open the project in the editor. It is worth noting that under Steam, there is no need to communicate the server port in the configuration of the dedicated session, unlike EOS. Steam automatically provides the address and port of the dedicated server to the client after the join. Therefore, you can use the connect info from the join task to perform browsing to the dedicated server. Another difference is that, as we saw under EOS, the server address is the IPv4 address of the machine hosting the server, whereas under Steam, the address of the dedicated server is the ID of the dedicated session. So now, we can remove the addition of the host IP address from the session configuration, and we must use the session ID instead. I'll leave the addition of the server port, as you can still find it on the client side via the connect info provided by the join task. It's not a problem to leave these additions, it's just to draw your attention to the fact that you can remove them and use the connect info instead. Here, in the master player controller, in the process of joining a dedicated server, we need to change the implementation to replace the use of the server IP address with the session ID when browsing to the dedicated server. The server host is now the session ID. We can leave the server port implementation as it is. You can also parse the connect info to extract the session ID and the server port. Indeed, we can simply pass only the reference to the session to this macro. Therefore, we can remove the inputs, server host and server port. Go to the Dedicated Sessions widget to adapt it following this change. We can simply pass only the session as input, then collect the server port in the macro. Do the same in the lobby game mode when the Start Dedicated Match button is clicked. Now everything is ready for the integration of dedicated servers into the game. I now want to remove the voice chat system implementation since it is used on the dedicated server and because Steam doesn't implement the voice chat interface. Go to the World 2 player controller to fix the errors following this change. I want to remove the Player Team widget from World 2 widget. As a reminder, in this widget, we implement the control of the voice chat room in the game. We now want to test the implementation. It's important to note that in development mode, you cannot launch a dedicated server and a client on the same machine with Steam. The Steam application supports only one instance of your game on a machine. Otherwise, only one instance of your game will work. For example, if you launch the dedicated server first and then the client, the dedicated server will work, but Steam on the client will not work. The reverse is true if you launch the client before the dedicated server. For example, here the dedicated server works fine and has successfully created the dedicated session. However, if you click on Login from the client, you will see that the Steam Online subsystem is not initialized. What we will do to be able to test is to run the dedicated server on one machine and a client on another machine. I am using VMware to do this. Player 2 can successfully search for the dedicated servers. The displayed URL does not reflect the correct URL being used. This is because we haven't updated the widget with the session ID instead of the IP address. Click on Join to verify that the client can join the server. We can see in the server log that a new connection has occurred. The player is connected, and the dedicated server has correctly started the waiting for player's timer before starting the session. We will also monitor the connection between the two parties. If the client leaves the match, the server will unregister him, and the timer will be reset since no players are connected. Test the automatic matchmaking by selecting World 2 and then clicking on Start Dedicated Match. Everything is working fine. If you want to test the connection of two players, you'll need a second machine. You can also use a cloud solution such as Amazon or Google Cloud. That's all for this video. See you in the next one.